Hi, so yesterday we went over and for some reviewed Lesson 5 and others, they just started Lesson 5. We talked about exponents. We started with the opening exercise where we added the 10 fours. We decided that there was 4 times 10, and that equaled 40. And when you're adding nines, it is 9 times 5, and that's 45. We call this one repeated addition. Because it used the addition symbol. We then saw 5 tens and called them 10 times 5 and said that was 50. We then went down and looked at examples 1 through 10, where we talked about exponents and particularly writing an expression in exponential form. An expression is the list of numbers with the multiplication signs without an actual answer. And the exponent we talked about was the raised number. It is the smaller number raised above, and in this case it was the little 5. And if you see here, I've written that next to it is exponent. We also sometimes say raised to the 5th power, or just raised to the 5th for short. The other number was the larger 5, and we call that the base number. What we do is we take the base number and we multiply it by itself the number of times that is shown by the power. So in this number 1, we have 5 to the 5th power. So we multiply 5 times 5, and we do that for 5 different times. We multiply 5 by itself for 5 different times. And so it looks like 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. Sometimes I use my fingers when I'm helping to figure out how many times I have to multiply 5 by itself. Then I went and showed you how to do it on paper for when you have the testing and you have to do it on paper and you don't have a calculator available to you. And I put the number of times that I've used the 5 in blue and that I still have to use the 5 in blue, and the number of times that I've actually used it. For example, the first one, 5 times 5 is 25. I used my green to show you that I've already used those first 2 5s, but I have 3 5s left over, so I kept those 3 5s in blue. And then I used the next 5, and then the next 5, and the next 5, and I used the green to show you that I was using each one. At the end, I ended up with 3,125. If you do it on a calculator, you would start by putting 5 and then the multiplication sign, so times 5 times 5, and you have to count on your fingers to make sure you don't put in 5 too many times. You can get a calculator and practice on it to make sure you get the same answer. Number 2 was 2 to the 4th power, and that one is done out here as well, and that turned out to be 16. Then we did write each expression in expanded form. So the first one, exponential, means I want you to write it as with an exponent. The second set, 3 and 4, has the exponent, and they want you to write it in expanded form. They want you to write it out. And so I did that for number 3. And then for number 4, I showed you yesterday a quick way of doing it. When you're multiplying tens by itself, you can write the number 1 and then put the number of zeros as there are tens, and I put that in blue to help you see that now. Today, we're going to continue with this, and we're going to work on number 5. Number 5 says g to the 3rd power. So first off, I want to bring your attention to the 3rd power. When we have something to the 3rd power, so g to the 3rd power, I want you to understand that we call that 3. Not only do we say the 3rd power, but we also call it cubed. So sometimes when you're reading a direction, it'll say something cubed. When it says something cubed, it means we need to raise it to the 3rd power. Our g here is our base. And so just like our number 5 and 2 was our base, our g is the base. And what this means is sometimes we will write a sentence out and we might say blank times 2 equals 6. And we know that that's 3 times 2 equals 6. But rather than writing a blank these days, we might say g times 2 equals 6. In this case, g would equal 3. And so we would replace the g with the 3. So rather than writing a blank all the time, we give it a letter. And it could be any letter. It could be A, it could be B, it could be X, it could be Z. A lot of times they use X. In this case, they use G. So what they want us to write here for g to the third power, when we're writing it in expanded form, which was the direction from the previous page, is g times g. In fact, let me write this in colors for us. G times g times g. That g is not very nice. Okay? So that g to the third power means we're multiplying the g times 3. It doesn't matter that this is not a number. Sometimes we use a letter to represent a number. If they said to us, well, what if g was 2? Then we would, if they say g equals 2, we would write 2 times 2 times 2. Wherever we had a g, we would put the number 2 in there. Okay, that's just an example of what it could be. Okay, so now let me ask you, going back to examples 1 through 4, they asked us to use a calculator to evaluate the expression. We already did that, so we don't have to do that. Our next direction is a question that says, what is the difference between 3g and g to the third power? So I want you to think about this. We've done both of these yesterday. What's the expanded form for 3g and the expanded form for g to the third power? So the expanded form for 3g is g plus g plus g. And writing out g to the third power, we have it right above. It's g times g times g. So what is the difference between 3g and g to the third power? Well, the difference is one is addition and one is multiplication. And now the next part shows us a different form of writing expressions in expanded form. It's using decimals. So when it says to write the expression in expanded form, again, we want to make sure we know what we're doing. We're writing in expanded form. That means we're writing it out. And if you notice, it's 3 8/10. There's a parentheses and then raised to the fourth power. That is because we want to make sure that you know to write 3.8 times 3.8 times, and not, if it looked like this, then it looks like we're saying 3 and 8 times 8 times 8 times 8, and that's not what they want us to do. So to make sure that we're sure about what we're doing, and we don't write it wrong, we write it with 3.8, put parentheses around it, and then raise to the fourth power. So the way that looks when we're writing it out is 3 8/10 times 3 8/10 times 3 8/10. And we have to do it 4 times, so you always want to make sure you've written it the correct amount of times. 3 8/10. If you use a calculator to figure that out, you will now know that the answer is 208 and 5,136 tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000. So 5,136 10,000ths. As long as you wrote the number, then you are fine. Number 7 says, write an expression in exponential form and then evaluate. This one, we need to do it in exponential form, so that we need to write 2 1/10 raised to the second power. Now what that looks like is, just so that you know when you're evaluating it, 2 1/10 times 2 1/10. That's 1, 2, my apologies. And so that equals 4 and 41/100ths. All right, moving on. Please do number 8. Okay, so the exponential form, you want to remember to write it as 75/100ths and put the parentheses around. And it's 3 times, so it's cubed. Don't forget 3 means cubed. You will see it later on where it will say cubed and it won't have the 3. You need to know that the 3 means cubed. Okay? What this basically means is 75/100ths times 75/100ths times 75/100ths. So if you do that in a calculator, what will be the answer that you get? And so I've gone ahead and done it out manually by hand, and the answer ends up being 0, and the numbers are 421,875. If you did it in a calculator, that is fine, but I want you to know how to do it by hand. I did 75/100ths times 75/100ths, and then I took that answer and I had to multiply it by 75/100ths again. So when you're multiplying it by 3 numbers, you can't just put all 3 of them together. So that's really important for when we're doing testing, and you can't use a calculator. The next question says the base number can also be a fraction. Convert the decimals to fractions and then evaluate and leave your answer as a fraction. So let's look at number 7. 2 and 1/10 is actually written like this. And then it's written with an exponent. The answer becomes 4 and 41/100ths. You're simply turning the decimals into fractions. The last one is 75/100ths. Because it's a fraction, I'm going to put it in parentheses. It's cubed, so I'm going to write that. And then my answer becomes, all I do is write this number over, and I put a 0 for every place setting there is. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 place settings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's how you convert decimal into a fraction. Your job now is to finish doing number 9, 10, and then the exercises 1 through 4. So please complete the circled. And I'll show you what they are. So 9, 10, exercise 1, which is this whole table, and standard form means the answer. And then number 2. And on the next page, exercises 3 and 4. You do not have to do the problem set for me. I will ask to see these in picture form. So tomorrow I'll have you take a picture of them and upload them into Google Classroom or show them to me. I'll probably have you show them to me right in class, but if not, I'll have you take a picture. So 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, and 4.